I'm John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our one-on-one interview, part of our Center Court series. We have a great guest up in Rochester, New York, the MBA program director for the Simon Business School at the University of Rochester, Ravi Mantena. Ravi, welcome.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity to share something about the wonderful Rochester Simon MBA program with some of your audience.
You know, the first business school I ever visited in my entire life, and you know, I visited a lot of them over the years, was Rochester.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was a writer at the time at Forbes magazine in New York. And my editor, I believe, knew one of your deans and sent me up there for an occasion to write a story. And so I never had been to a business school before then. And now we're talking, my goodness, that would be in the early 1980s, probably 82, 83. I forget who was dean back then. And I'm sure you're too young to remember.
I wasn't here, but I have, as academics tend to do, we have some interest in history. So I've looked at the history of the school, even though I wasn't around.
And the history is actually interesting because one of the things that you find out is how quant-based and economics-based the school was founded on. In other words, the school was founded by a dean who believed that you should look at business through the lens of economics as a science.
That's absolutely right? I think, MBAs did not start with Simon. They existed for a good 5-6 decades before Simon came along. And I think the big difference in perspective, and this was partially, we have to give credit where credit is due, is that a lot of our initial faculty came out of Chicago, which, yes, as you know, has got a very, very strong economics focus. And at that point, business schools in general, I think, tended to think about businesses as human organizations and really focusing more on the human and behavioral aspects of business, where our founding dean and a lot of the faculty at that point believed that looking at business from an economic lens, really taking more of a scientific kind of lens to it, actually has a lot to offer in terms of understanding the problems and understanding how solutions could be crafted to those problems, and to what extent those solutions can succeed at systemic organizational level. Right? Economics still is evolving a little bit in terms of informing us about how people behave at an individual level. I think it has a ways to go there, and there's been tremendous development in the last 20 years or so. But economics gives us a great lens to looking at things at a broader at a higher level. And that's been the foundation of everything we do at Simon for the last 60 years now.
And when you understand that foundation, you also understand why Simon became the first MBA program in America to be a STEM designated program.
That's exactly right? So, our vision, I think, going back to what you're saying, the early thing was to be able to apply, economics as a discipline to look at management problems, but to really focus on real management problems, right? Which meant that you not only have to use a good theoretical framework, but you also have to be able to have the data and the information from the real world come to bear on that particular problem if you were to devise practical solutions to those problems, and to understand if the solutions you've created are any good, if they're actually going to have any kind of traction in the real world, right? So that combination of an analytical, data-based kind of approach and the economics part of it has been at the core of our educational and the curricular DNA for all these years. And that's absolutely right. And it's no surprise that we were the first MBA program to be STEM designation across all of our specialization. It doesn't matter what kind of MBA you want to do at Simon. You can still do it as part of a STEM certified program. You don't have to, by the way.
You could do a concentration in marketing and it would still be STEM designated.
Absolutely, right. You could do all of those concentrations. And by the way, this is not just the MBA. Every one of our programs is STEM certified. Even all of our MS programs are. And I think even to this day, that was about 4 or 5 years ago, but I think even to this day, we are probably one of the very few MBA programs where everything is STEM designated. There's definitely other programs where parts of their programs are STEM, but I think for us, every single thing is STEM.
Yeah, that's true. Now, it's a basic traditional MBA, meaning it's 2 years. You have a cohort system.
Yeah.
People go through the core as a cohort.
Yeah.
Your core largely occupies your first year of studies, right?
Yes.
Are you able to take any electives in the second part of the first year?
Yeah, so let me take a step back a little bit, because I think that
Good.
helps us understand a little bit about the overall curriculum a little bit, right? So as a program, as an educational programs, for our MBAs, we have 4 broad goals. Okay, the first thing is develop some basic functional skills in business, and importantly, to get good business intuition, to develop analytical skills that will make you good problem solvers and decision makers, to be effective communicators, and to be effective leaders of your organizations and in your communities. Okay, so those are the 4 broad goals, and our entire curriculum really is focused on those goals, right? I mean, it's not that dissimilar from a lot of the MBA programs in many respects, right? Now, the core is where we build the foundational skills along all of these elements, and then that gets deepened and that gets refined in the elective classes, in the experiential projects, as well as in the extracurricular activities. Okay, and you're absolutely right. A good part of our first year is focused on the core. Okay, so we have 11 core classes out of a total of 25 that the students need to graduate. Okay, now out of the 11, they have to take at least 10 of them. They can all take all 11, but they have to take at least 10 of them in their first year. So about 2/3 of the academic time in the first year is spent in the core curriculum. Now, the core curriculum does include 2 classes which are focused on communication and team building. And it also includes a sequence of 2 classes, a 2-class sequence, which is focused on data analysis and problem solving kinds of things. Okay, so that is part of the core. Having said that, the students are in fact able to take 2 electives in the fall of their first year and 3 electives in the spring of their first year. Okay, so they can take 5 electives during the first year. The first year is jam-packed. Okay, so a lot of the time the students will come in and we don't know what hit us, right? So it's very intense. It's very intense academically in terms of career preparedness and in terms of the extracurricular activities.
And let me just step back and tell people why all this is important. If you're able to take 5 electives in your first year, and you kind of know what you really want to do with your MBA, you could take those electives, let's say, in finance. And if you're going to have an internship in finance, you're going to be deeply involved in financial concepts. You're going to have the toolkit, the basics to impress an employer on your internship, so that when you go back to school, you may very well go back with a full-time offer in your pocket if you want it. The other thing then is you can take more advanced courses in there and also diversify your elective offerings. So the ability to have 5 different electives in your first year before you do an internship is a very interesting and substantial thing to set you up to succeed in your internship during the summer.
You're absolutely right, John. I think it helps at 2 levels, right? One is, yes, succeeding in an internship, but of course, to be able to succeed in an internship, you need to be able to find an internship, right? And both components are extremely important. And that's why we're very, very intentional about when we schedule these electives, right? So our electives are in the second half of fall and the second half of spring, okay? Now, the idea with the second half of fall is that we expect our students, when they come in right in the beginning, right in August, in what we call pre-fall, to be able to identify, not necessarily commit to, but identify a career pathway they are going towards. What kind of functional or industry kind of role you want to go into. And that kicks off a whole bunch of activities that'll help them build the skills and training necessary to pursue those kinds of opportunities, as well as provide them with support and guidance towards pursuing them. Okay, and one of the things that does is also then helps our advising team to guide these students towards specific electives in the second part of fall, which might be helpful with their recruitment process, with the interviewing, building deeper skills beyond the basic functional classes to get a little bit deeper to be able to get those internship opportunities, okay? So that's the reason for the second half of fall. The second half of spring is, well, sometimes what happens is that, and this happens, I'm sure, all the time, we talk to MBA students, is that they come in with a specific idea about what they want to do and what kind of career they want to go into, but they change their mind, either because they absolutely love something else, or they get frustrated in the recruiting process, realize that a certain area probably requires different skills and competencies than what they thought they were strong at, and they are finding other strengths in other areas, and they want to to use a very overused word, pivot in a slightly different direction.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for the spring ones is, so sometimes they end up going into internships, which are different from what they initially thought the internships were going to be. And the spring internships are really more towards, okay, now I can have a better idea of what I'm going into. And maybe I did not really have the opportunity to build those skills back in the fall in the electives. Now I have the ability to actually focus on that a little bit more and build some of those skills before I go to the internship.
Right. Now, give me a sense of your class profile. You're not a factory. You're not an MBA factory churning out people on an assembly line. It's more of a custom bespoke approach, is it not?
That's correct. So we are a small business school. So I think, in fact, we might be the smallest business school in the top 25 in Business Week. Okay, maybe St. Paul is the second smallest. We bring in about 110 people approximately a year, give or take 2 or 3 this side or that side, which is in 2 cohorts. Okay, so it's a class of about between 55 and 60 people per cohort in 2 cohorts. So that's the size of our program. And yeah, I mean, and the people get a lot of personal attention. I know everyone in my MBA program, every single person by name, pretty much, because I only have 220 students I work with over a 2-year period. So and I teach in the core classes, so I know every one of them. They get a lot of personal attention from our student engagement team and their advisors. Every one of them, they know them, and they get to know each other. Okay, it's a very small, very tight-knit community. And as we were talking before, and a few minutes before, Rochester in the winter, there's a lot of snow, so people tend to stick indoors, and that gives them the opportunity to get to know each other a lot better.
A lot of bonding going on.
A lot of bonding going on, exactly.
And you have concentrations. Obviously, the MBA is a general management degree, but people are allowed to do deep dives and to concentrate, right?
That's correct. So in fact, we actually call them now, we used to call them concentrations before we redesigned our curriculum several years ago, but we call them specializations now, right? And we actually have 10 specializations, which are aligned with the specific career pathways that most of our graduates take, okay? These 10 specializations are grouped into 3 broad career tracks. One is consulting, which has 4 specializations within it. One is finance, which has 4 specializations under that. And there's marketing with 2 specializations. Okay, so that's kind of the 3 sets. And in addition to these specializations, of course, we offer a set of minors for things like analytics, entrepreneurship, global business, leadership, and so on. So people can do specializations as well as minors or some combination of the 2. Okay, now the idea is that these provide a framework in terms of how to interpret and how to structure your experience. They're not required to specialize, right? They could graduate from Simon with no specialization and no minor, and that's fine. They're not required to have one, but we believe that this provides a kind of a good framework to think about how to structure, what kind of training and skills to build, what combination of classes makes sense, when to do different things. But part of the thing, an MBA program is you need to be very intentional about when you can do specific things, because you need to sync both to the internal academic calendar and the external recruiting calendar. And you need to build skills at different points in time. And I think this gives us a way to kind of, thread that needle effectively. Yeah,
exactly. And also, what came out of the curriculum review a few years ago in terms of other changes? Did you install more experiential learning in the program?
Oh, we certainly did. So that's one of the things that came out of the curriculum review is we increased the experiential content in the program. And the other big difference it made, the other big change, structural change we made is we introduced what is called as a breadth requirement. Okay. Now, as we were talking earlier in the conversation today, Simon School has been very focused on those economic and analytical skills, right? And one of the things that was happening is what not everybody, but some percentage of our students were graduating with so much focus on technical skills. They were not paying enough attention to the other skills, of course, that are important in the business world. Okay, sometimes people might call them soft skills or managerial skills, or other kinds of skills, right? So we kind of intentionally put some more requirements as part of the curriculum to round out our students more, or basically to take away opportunities so that they don't graduate without those skills, right? Be very intentional about that. So it's something called the breadth component of the curriculum, where there is a menu of classes, a menu of 6 different classes, and the students have to take at least 2 of those classes, right? These count as electives, but they are required to take at least 2 out of that set, what we call breadth electives.
Uh-huh.
And most of them are focused on leadership kind of soft skills is what they're focused on.
And why was that change made?
The change was made for two reasons. One, because these skills are important, right? They've always been important. And we realized that, because of the reputation of our program and therefore the kind of students it attracts, sometimes some students just love doing the analytical stuff and that's what they value. So in some sense, by taking away a little bit of their independence, we're kind of saying, look, whether you realize this or not, this is important, and you'll thank us 10 years down the line to force you to do some things that you might not like to doing today, but we think are really, really important for your future career development.
I mean, so often you hear alumni say, when they went to school, they thought the so-called soft stuff was sort of I would say, fluff. And then when they got into the real world, they realized that the fluff was the stuff they needed the most. And
Yes.
The technical skills was merely a foundation, but that's all it is.
Absolutely, right. And you're absolutely right. I think the challenge with the so-called soft skills, I think, is the way you acquire them is quite different from the way you acquire traditional academic kind of, theory and analytical skills. They have to be delivered through a set of experiential kind of, situations, right? They are experiential in nature, and building that in a good way is not easy to do, right? It's not easy to do. And that's what we've tried to do is increase those skills, build more experiential components into our curriculum, as well as actually open up a lot more and opportunities for doing those kinds of things as part of their extracurricular experiences, not just as part of the curriculum, right? That's where they can build. And we're really, really fortunate in that. Earlier, we were talking about the Simon School being a small bespoke kind of program. We only have 110 students, okay? But we have a large number of clubs and other organizations that support our students in terms of developing their personal, professional, and other interests, okay? And what this also means that a very large fraction of our student body gets the opportunity to be leaders of these organizations. And when they're put in positions of leadership with responsibility to have to deliver experiences which are valuable to their peers in most cases, they are forced to basically experiment and learn some of the skills that are required. Leadership skills, team working skills, the ability to set a vision for their organizations and come up with a plan on what they have to do, and holding themselves accountable to deliver on those promises. Okay, so I think that provides a very, very good laboratory to be able to build these skills.
Plus, I'm sure most of the academic work is collaborative. I mean, you're probably organizing in teams and people are working together and learning what it's like to work together when someone on the team may not be carrying much weight one time and other people have to carry the weight for that person, and how to deal with that, or dealing with people who have different strengths and weaknesses or cultural differences, which is all about what working in the real world is.
Oh, absolutely, it is. And yes, you're absolutely right. I think a lot of the work at Simon outside of exams is really done in teams, right? Especially in the core classes in the first year, pretty much everything is done in teams. And we spend a lot of time and put a lot of thought into constructing these core teams, which are diverse core teams and very well balanced. We pay attention not just to the demographics of these students, but we pay attention to their educational backgrounds, their work backgrounds, their personalities and interaction styles, what kind of careers they want to go into. And we try to build balanced teams along all of these different dimensions. Okay, but you're absolutely right. I think the ability to work in teams is really, really important in the world, but it's also very challenging. Teams are not always the best environments for productivity or doing good work. Okay, so you have to be able to not just build these teams, but to be able to support them together, right? Build teams very intentionally, have team building activities, provide 360-degree reviews, mentor these teams, support them, do conflict resolution. And so there's a lot of work that goes into making these teams work well. And we're actually very, very fortunate that actually a lot of our second years, part of the experiential learning I was talking about earlier, is that a number of our second years actually help us in providing this environment for our first years. They work as mentors, they work as facilitators, and they work as leaders for these people.
Yeah.
And we train them to do that, right? That's part of the curricular component, is we train them to be able to facilitate these teams and make them productive and well-functioning teams.
And it's better to practice at school and make mistakes than go in the real world and make mistakes.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. I mean, it's not infrequent for people to blow up, and I think it's
Yes,
good, to kind of vent
totally
some of
good.
that pressure, so that they understand what it feels like and how they should behave. And yes, absolutely.
So, Ravi, if I were to talk to your alumni and ask them as a group, what are the three things about the Simon MBA experience that resonated most with you and that you carry with you years after you complete the program?
Oh boy,
What would
John,
the
as you know this very well, I think an MBA is a very personal experience. Right? The experience is
Yeah.
different for every single person, and I've watched you talk about it a lot of times. And when people think about the programs, they think in like a very abstract terms. They don't necessarily think about what it means for them, right? So I'm sure that people will talk about it in lots of different ways. But if I were to identify maybe three themes, like you're saying, in that, I think one of the things they're going to say is about the top-notch professors. They're going to say the professors were amazing, okay, and the quality of teaching was absolutely top-notch. They're going to talk about what we were talking about at the beginning of the interview today, about the rigor of the curriculum, right? What set them up to be, very clear thinkers, how to approach problems in a very clear, systematic way, and to develop very well-grounded problems, which then created the foundation for them not just to do well in their careers, but to continue to learn and grow. Okay.
Right.
And third, I think they're going to talk about the experience as being transformational. They would have said, this was an environment, this was a diverse, close-knit environment where people were showing up, and people, we created an environment where people were able to bring their authentic selves, and they were able to grow in ways, both professionally and personally, in a way that they might not have anticipated. Okay, that is something that I keep hearing from people, is that this was amazing. I mean, the journey was worth it, right? Forget the outcome. The outcome, I think, was good too, but I think the journey
Sure.
was worth it.
Yeah. And I think, most schools talk about a transformational experience. I think in a 2-year period, you can actually deliver it and really change someone's life.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the community matters, right? I mean, that's been a focus of ours, as much as we're focused on analytics and as much we're focused on economics and like a rigorous curriculum. I think we're at least as focused on this being a community where we celebrate and embrace diversity of thought, diversity of different kinds of people, and be very intentional about including different people and being there for them and supporting each other. And I think that matters a lot in terms of the experience people get.
It's always easy for a generation to say we're going through unprecedented times, but my goodness, we are. We are in the middle of a pandemic that's in its third year. There are all kinds of supply chain breaks. Inflation has reared its ugly head in America. The world seems full with conflict and tension. If you look at the situation in the Ukraine, societies, not only in America, but other democratic societies are heavily polarized. There are nationalist tendencies. And all of these trends affect the way business is done in the economy in the future. So I wonder, just stepping back and thinking about, oh my goodness, all the chaos and change that's going on, underlined by incredible advances in technology and data, and our ability to use data more effectively today, and probably 5-10 years from now, even more effectively. And then the rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning and what that means, and whether algorithms will actually replace a lot of professional workers. When you think about this, it can either give you a migraine or it can give you a wonderful sense of the opportunity ahead. Because out of every crisis or challenge, there are winners, and there's a lot of ways to win. So I wonder how all of this informs the way you think about your MBA program and how it may evolve in the future.
Well, that's a great question, John. And you're absolutely right. I think we live in incredible times, and it's both exciting and scary, I think, at the same time, right? And all the changes in terms of technology, social, political, economic that you're talking about have been going on and have been accelerating. And as you said, and the pandemic, of course, has put extra spotlight on all of these changes. So I think there's going to be a lot of changes. Let me pick out maybe 4 broad ways in which these changes are going to affect, at least the Simon program, I'm sure is going to affect the business program broadly. So you're talking about the changes in technology in terms of analytics, artificial intelligence, and so on. And as a program that's focused on analytics, of course, we want to be on the leading edge of that education in analytics and business, right? So I'm sure that's going to have an impact on the way we do things. We're constantly looking at, the new developments that are coming in the field of analytics and how they apply to business. So we are refreshing our courses. We are adding new courses in that curriculum. But also, I think equally importantly, we are thinking about what is the best way to take a bunch of people who are really focused on business. They're not engineers. They're not mathematicians. They're
Right.
business people. And
Yeah.
they're excited about solving business problems. So I think that requires a certain way of presenting this technology and educating and having the people focus on certain aspects of this and how to do that better. I think that's something we'll continue to work on.
And this is in your wheelhouse because as essentially a quant analytical school, the market has come to you.
Oh, absolutely. Right. We were talking about this a long time ago. We sometimes like to joke that we were big on data, became data got big, right? So it's kind of, yes, absolutely, that is true, right? This was in our wheelhouse and we continue to be at the leading edge. That's definitely our intention. The second, I think, is the other thing that I think the pandemic has put a spotlight on is on this interaction between technology and the delivery of educational experiences, right? We've been forced to be in the Zoom world for the last 2 years. And I think as we emerge out of this pandemic, we're of course increasingly thinking about using technology not as a substitute for an in-person experience, but a way of complementing and enriching that experience, right?
Yeah.
Right? Moving away from what used to be largely an instructor-centered in-person classroom to creating a learner-centered, kind of a much richer learning environment focused on the learner. Okay,
Right.
We're still in the early stages of that, right? We're
Yeah.
still very much in the early stages of that, and I'm sure we're going to do, learn a lot about that and go move forward. And this is not just about how the way we teach and learn, but it's also about, for instance, changing things like access and flexibility, right, for our students. And that's where technology can play a really, really powerful role. So that's going to be another change. I think a third change goes back to something you talked about a little bit earlier, is in terms of the importance of experiential content in the curriculum. I think today, both students and businesses require a much smaller distance between the classroom and the real world.
Mm.
Okay? And the only way we can, of course, deliver on that is by building more robust experiential components into our curriculum. And that's something we're focused on as well. That started with the curriculum redesign I talked about a few years ago, but we continue to move in that direction to have our students work on more live projects, extend the classroom, bring the outside world more into the classroom. Every single way we can do that. Yeah. And the last thing I'm going to talk about goes back to something we were talking about also a little bit earlier, which is that all of this change socially and politically has meant that we are in a world where it's no longer acceptable. It never should have been, but it's certainly no longer acceptable to treat your employees as interchangeable drones, right? We need to recognize the fact that each person has got a distinct identity. Their lived experiences are different. They have different aspirations. And we need to create organizations where people can bring in their authentic selves and their true selves, full selves to their work. And that requires a different kind of leadership. It requires a leadership ethos, which is focused on empathy and focused on trying to recognize and value and treasure those differences and working to make those differences into coherent strengths rather than working despite those differences.
Right.
And again, this is a really hard thing to do. But fortunately, I think we have the right environment in the school to be able to work on building those skills that are really, really important in the future.
So Ravi, if someone is interested in wanting to go and apply and hopefully enroll in your MBA program, what steps should they be taking? Can they call you? They should obviously talk to people in admissions. Can they reach out to your students or your alumni?
All of those, right? So the first point of contact, I think, for most people is the admissions office. Sure. But they should feel free to completely reach me. I mean, I think it might be hard to get me on the phone. I am not next to a phone most of the time, and probably my cell phone is switched off. At least my wife complains that my cell phone is switched off all the time. She doesn't know that I'm not picking up her calls, and hopefully you'll cut out this part of the interview. But yes, they can certainly email me, and I certainly respond to the emails from any students. They can talk to existing students. We have a lot of Experience Simon kind of events where we bring people on campus to experience a thing. Now in the virtual world, we have people coming in virtually into campus, into our classrooms. This week, I had 70 students 2 days ago joining me in my class on campus and getting that experience of what it feels like to be in a class. And it was not 70 students at the same time. They were split into two groups, but they can come in that way as well. And there's a lot of different ways. I mean, we put out a lot of materials on our website, on our blogs, social media. But today, there's lots of ways to reach us.
That's really true. I like the idea that you could even attend a class from your home, from your living room, even.
Yeah, no, I think this is one of the ways in which, we always used to have that ability to come to class and attend class, but that was in person. And I think one of the things that Zoom has changed, the current thing, irreversibly, right, is the ability to be able to do that because we get a lot of international students, and it would be very, very hard for them to come and have that experience locally. So much easier to jump on, although it might not be the best time in the day for where you are, depending on where you are in the world, to be able to join class at 4 in the morning, or I don't know, 11 at night. But certainly, it makes it possible.
Well, Ravi, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. I can't wait to get back to Rochester. Not this winter, though. I might wait for the late spring.
Oh, absolutely. But John would love to welcome you back here in Rochester and show you around. And hopefully you'll recognize that the place is quite different from when you visited 25, 30 years ago.
I have been there before, since then, of course. I think 2 other times. So I've been to your school 3 times, but I need to visit again. So I hope I'll be able to do that this year.
We'll work on that. Thank you so much, John.
Absolutely. Ravi, thank you so much. All right, you've been listening to Ravi Mantena, who is the MBA program director at the Simon Business School at the University of Rochester, as well as a professor who teaches in the core. Now, wouldn't you love to have Ravi as one of your core professors? I think I would love that, frankly. All right, this is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Thanks for watching.